It was the moment nobody saw coming, and the internet is still reeling. Picture this, a dimly lit podcast studio, cameras rolling, tension so thick you could slice it with a mic stand. Joyner Lucas sits forward in his chair, eyes narrowed, hanging on every word. Across the room, a clip of Eminem is playing, the rap legend himself finally breaking down the untold, unfiltered, and utterly jaw-dropping real story behind Stan. For years, fans thought they knew the meaning. They were wrong, dead wrong. And what M revealed, it wasn't just personal. It was nuclear. Within hours, the clip detonated across social media, sparking a wildfire of reactions. But the real explosion came when Will.I.M stepped in, not to back Eminem, not to back Joyner, but to drop his own bombshell. Black Thought is more influential than Jay-Z. Those 12 words didn't just break the rap internet. They fractured it. Allegiances shifted. Group chats lit up. And behind the scenes, sources say even industry veterans were scrambling to take sides. What happened next? Heated calls, public shade, and a brewing war of words that threatens to pull some of the biggest names in hip-hop into the crossfire. And trust me, this is just the beginning. Joyner Lucas sat in the corner of the dim backstage lounge, his phone screen glowing faintly in the low light. The room smelled of coffee, sound cables, and quiet tension. He had just scrolled past a headline that stopped him cold, a clip from an interview where Eminem had opened up about the Stan story in a way nobody had ever heard before. It wasn't the polished, media-trained version fans knew from old MTV specials. No, this was raw, almost trembling in its delivery, like M had been holding back a truth for decades and finally decided to let it spill. Videos showed him leaning forward in his studio chair, his cap pulled low, voice steady but heavy. He spoke about how the fictional Stan wasn't just a character. It was a combination of letters and real encounters with fans who blurred the line between admiration and obsession. One detail in particular had Joyner's jaw tightening, and claimed that during the early 2000s, a young fan had crossed multiple boundaries, sending cryptic letters, showing up uninvited, even confronting M's daughter's school security. The story took a chilling turn when M hinted that parts of Stan's final verse were pulled almost word for word from one of those letters. Joyner leaned back, muttering under his breath, "Man, I knew there was more to it." He wasn't alone in that thought. The internet had already exploded, with hashtags trending and fans dissecting every frame of the clip. But before the dust could settle, Will.I.M in an unrelated interview had thrown gasoline on the fire. During a casual conversation about hip-hop history, he said, "Black Thought is more influential than Jay-Z." The statement was like a match dropped in dry grass. Within minutes, timelines filled with debates, hot takes, and thinly veiled insults between fan bases. Joyner's phone was now a minefield of notifications. Texts from fellow artists, producers, and even a couple of veteran rappers were pouring in. One read, "Bro, if you ride with them on this, you know the J Camp is gonna take it personal." Another simply said, "This is about to get ugly." It didn't take long before Joyner found himself pulled into the vortex. A live stream started, trending where a group of hip-hop commentators speculated that Joyner would inevitably side with Eminem, given their collaborations and mutual respect. One commentator went further, suggesting Joyner might even drop a track defending M's take and, by association, aligning himself with Will.I.M's single quotes as controversial statement. Joyner wasn't sure if he wanted that smoke, but the thought lingered. The industry was already polarizing into camps, the M and Will supporters versus the J loyalists. Rumors swirled that Black Thought himself had been privately contacted about Will's comment, with insiders claiming he laughed it off in public but took it personally in private. Meanwhile, in a quiet part of Detroit, Eminem was reportedly getting flooded with calls from mutual acquaintances urging him to walk it back before it spiraled. But according to a source close to him, M's response was blunt. "It's my story. I'm not sugarcoating it for anybody." Joyner finally broke his silence late that night with a cryptic tweet. "Truth hurts, but it still sets you free." Within seconds, it was screen-capped, analyzed, and thrown into the growing storm of interpretations. Was he talking about M's Stan confession? Was it a nod to Will.I.M's single quotes as bold comparison? Or was it something else entirely? The following morning, Joyner agreed to appear on a hip-hop roundtable podcast to clarify his stance. But instead of calming the waters, the appearance sent shockwaves. During the heated discussion, one of the hosts accused him of hiding behind ambiguity and demanded to know where he stood. Joyner smirked, leaned at the mic, and said, "M told the truth, and Will told his truth." If that makes people uncomfortable, maybe they need to ask themselves why. Those words were replayed on social media reels for days. Fans flooded the comments with split reactions, some praising him for keeping it real, others accusing him of stirring the pot just to stay relevant. The drama took another turn when a well-known Jay-Z affiliate posted a story on Instagram with a single sentence, "Funny how some people forget who opened doors for them." Though no names were mentioned, the timing made it obvious to everyone who it was aimed at. Behind closed doors, calls were happening that no one on the outside could hear. Managers spoke to managers, lawyers weighed in on the potential fallout, and a few mutual friends tried to set up a private meeting between the camps before things got uglier. But every time a resolution seemed close, another public comment or leaked DM reignited the feud. By the end of the week, there were whispers that Eminem might address everything in a verse, not a diss track, but something that would set the record straight. This, of course, only made fans more rabid with anticipation. And then came the twist nobody predicted, a leaked voice note allegedly from Black Thought himself, where he addressed Will. I am directly. In it, he reportedly said, "I respect you, but you're storing up comparisons that don't help the culture." The tone was calm, but the implication was clear. This is becoming bigger than just a debate over influence. Joyner listened to that leak in his car, staring out at the city skyline, wondering if he had just stepped into a feud that might pull him in deeper than he intended. He knew one thing for sure, there was no going back now. The lines had been drawn, and every move from here would be under a microscope. And just as the city lights blurred in his vision, his phone buzzed again, this time with a message that made his pulse quicken. It was from himself. Joyner stared at the message for a long moment, his thumb hovering over the screen. It was short, just 5 words. "Meet me tonight." No press. There was no punctuation, no explanation. Just the kind of directness that told Joyner this wasn't going to be a casual hangout. He fired back a quick "where?" And within seconds, a location dropped, a small recording studio tucked away in an industrial block of Detroit. The drive there felt longer than it was. The streets were empty, the air thick with that kind of silence that feels loaded. Joyner's mind was spinning through every possible reason and would want a private meeting now in the middle of a storm. Maybe it was to strategize. Maybe to warn him. Or maybe to ask him to step back entirely before things crossed a line that couldn't be UNCROSSED. When he arrived, the building was nearly invisible from the road. No bright lights, no signs, just a narrow door with a faint buzzer. Inside, the familiar scent of old wood and fresh coffee hit him. Down a short hallway, M was already there, leaning over a mixing console, his hoodie pulled tight. A notepad in front of him. "You came," M said without looking up. His voice was low, deliberate. Joyner pulled up a chair, sitting across from him. "You didn't give me much of a choice," he replied, trying to mask the tension in his voice. M finally looked up, eyes sharp. "They're twisting it," he said. "The story, the meaning, everything. And now with Will's comment, people are acting like this is about sides. It's not, but it's turning into that." Joyner nodded slowly. "You know, once it's out there, you can't control it. People are going to run with their own narratives." M sighed, rubbing his hands over his face. "Yeah, but some of these narratives, they're dangerous. I didn't name names, I didn't call anyone out, but somehow now I'm in a cold war with half the industry. And you." He trailed off, his gaze locking on Joyner. "You're getting pulled in just because you're close to me." Close to me? Joyner leaned back, considering his words. "So, what are you saying? You want me to back off?" M shook his head. "No, I want you to be ready. Because if this keeps going, they're going to come for you too. And not in songs, in business. In shows, in the background where you can't see it." The warning landed heavier than Joyner expected. Before he could reply, M slid the notepad toward him. On it were scribbled bars, raw and unfinished, but potent. Joyner scanned them, and his heart rate ticked up. These weren't just clarifications. These were confessions. Admissions that could rewrite how fans saw Stan forever. "You're really going to put this out?" Joyner asked quietly, and his eyes didn't waver. "If I don't, they win. The people who want to twist my words, the ones who want to erase the truth. I'd rather burn the room down than let them repaint it. Before Joyner could respond, the studio door creaked open and and stepped in, wearing a dark coat and a look that was equal parts curiosity and caution. Joyner blinked in surprise. You knew he was coming? He asked him. Yeah, Em said simply. We need to talk, all of us. The next hour was a strange blend of tension and strategy. Will was calm, almost too calm, as he explained that. His comment about Black Thought had been meant as a personal perspective, not a crown snatching. But he admitted he'd underestimated how fast the internet could turn it into a weapon. I'm not walking it back, Will said firmly, but I'm not trying to pit legends against each other either. Still, you have to understand, some people want this fight. It gets clicks, it sells shows, it keeps people distracted. Joyner glanced between the two men, realizing they were speaking about more than just music. There were undercurrents here, power moves, old grudges, maybe even industry politics that stretched beyond their own careers. As the conversation deepened, phones buzzed on the table. Joyner's screen lit up with a news alert. Jay-Z seen. Leaving private meeting with Black Thought. The headline was vague, but the photos showed both men walking side by side, looking serious. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. They're closing ranks. Will muttered, almost to himself. M glanced at the headline and smirked. Good, that means they're paying attention. But Joyner felt a shift in the air. This wasn't just about who was more influential or about a 20-year-old song anymore. This was about alliances forming in real time, and once those lines were drawn, there would be no erasing them. The night ended with no handshake deals, no grand resolutions. Will left first, disappearing into the cold Detroit night. M lingered, scribbling more lines in his notebook while Joyner sat in silence, trying to process everything. As he drove away, his phone buzzed again, this time with a direct message from a producer tied to Jay-Z's camp. It read, "We need to talk, alone." He didn't reply, not yet. But deep down, he knew part of him wanted to hear what they had to say. Joyner didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversations in his head. M's warning. Will's calculated calm. The producer's cryptic message from Jay's camp. It was like standing in the middle of two tidal waves, knowing they were going to collide whether he moved or not. By the time the sun pushed through his blinds, he'd already made up his mind. He was going to that meeting. The location they sent him was discreet. A sleek glass front building in Midtown Manhattan that looked like it could have been an art gallery or a tech startup. Inside, it was quiet enough to hear his own footsteps. He was led into a private conference room where two people were already waiting. The producer who'd messaged him, and a tall, sharp-eyed man Joyner recognized instantly as one of Jay-Z's longtime business strategists. Glad you came, the producer said, motioning for him to sit. The strategist didn't waste time on pleasantries. We're not here to drag you into something you don't want, he began, but you need to understand that every public move you make from this point is being watched. You think you're just commenting on a story about Stan or will in single quotes as opinion. But to a lot of people, it's about loyalty. And loyalty in this business isn't just about friendships. It's about access, opportunities, doors that either stay open or slam shut. Joyner sat back, folding his arms. So what, you want me to pick a side? Not pick, the strategist said evenly. Align, and alignment doesn't have to mean you go after him. It can mean you stay neutral, stay quiet, let this pass. Because if you don't, there are people ready to make sure certain calls don't get returned, certain stages don't get offered. The message was clear. This wasn't a threat in the loud, aggressive sense. It was a quiet promise of isolation if he didn't tread carefully. Joyner met the strategist's gaze. And what happens if I don't play ball? The man didn't blink. You find out how small this industry really is. Before Joyner could respond, the producer slid a phone across the table. On the screen was a short clip, grainy, obviously filmed on a phone, showing him in the studio from the night before. In the clip, he was mid-sentence saying, I'd rather burn the room down than let them repaint it. Out of context, it sounded aggressive, even hostile. This, the producer said softly, is already circulating. By tomorrow, it'll be in the blogs, spun however people want. You don't want to be standing next to that fire when it hits full blaze. Joyner stared at the screen, feeling the weight of what they were doing. It wasn't just persuasion. It was pressure, using leaks and half-truths to tilt the game. He left the meeting without agreeing to anything, but the unease sat in his chest like a stone. Outside, the city was buzzing, oblivious to the silent chess match playing out in its shadows. By the afternoon, the clip had indeed hit the blogs. Headlines screamed about him, threatening the industry and targeting unnamed legends. Comment sections were a battlefield. Some fans defended him, others accused him of trying to rewrite history. And in the middle of it all, Joyner's own name started trending again, not because of anything he'd said, but because people were dissecting his silence. That night, he got a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was deep, calm, and unmistakable. Black thought himself. "I don't usually do this," Thought said, "but I think you should hear my side before you get dragged too far." Joyner agreed to meet, this time in Philadelphia, in a quiet jazz bar that Black Thought reportedly owned. The meeting was almost the opposite of his time with Am and Will. No raised voices, no scribbled bars on a notepad. Thought spoke like a man who'd seen too many storms to get rattled by the latest one. "Will's entitled to his opinion," he said, sipping his drink. "But influence isn't a scoreboard. It's not about who wore the crown longer or louder. It's about who shaped the culture in ways people don't always see. Jay's done that. So have I. Em's done it too. But when you put names side by side like that, people take it as a challenge, not a compliment." Joyner listened quietly. "So what do you want me to do?" Thought leaned in slightly. "Nothing. Just don't let anyone make you a pawn. Because that's what's happening right now. They'll pull you toward one camp, then the other, until you forget you were supposed to be your own man." The words lingered with Joyner long after he left. He drove back to his hotel in silence, thinking about how every conversation seemed to carry its own truth, its own warning, and said to be ready for attacks. Jay's camp said to stay neutral. Thought said to be his own man, but the problem was, all of them couldn't be right at the same time. The next morning, his phone buzzed with a new notification, a leaked snippet of a track. It was unmistakably Eminem's voice spitting venom over a hard beat, and one line in particular had the internet on fire. "Legends play chess, but I'm flipping the board." And Joyner knew things were about to escalate beyond anything he'd imagined. The snippet spread like wildfire. By noon, every major hip-hop blog, podcast, and reaction channel had posted it. The comments were relentless, some calling it genius, others branding it reckless. The phrase "flipping the board" became a meme, slapped onto photos of toppled chess sets, burning bridges, even old beefs reignited for clicks. Joyner couldn't open his phone without seeing it, and every time he did, he felt the knot in his stomach tighten. By mid-afternoon, he started getting calls from journalists asking if he had heard the full track. They wanted quotes, sound bites, even off-the-record hints about whether he'd be featured on it. He ignored them all, but the silence didn't slow the frenzy. His name was now firmly attached to the story whether he liked it or not. That night, the full song leaked, not through official channels, but via a shaky live stream from someone inside a listening session. Eminem's voice was sharp, each verse weaving between personal confession and pointed challenge. While he never named Jay-Z or Black Thought, the metaphors were thinly veiled. Lines about the kings of invisible thrones and crowns built on borrowed bricks had fans dissecting every syllable. And then came the part Joyner didn't expect: his name dropped in the third verse. Joyner seemed the storm still. Walk through the rain, but can't leash a wolf, can't shackle the chain. It wasn't a diss. It was a cosign, a public declaration that Joyner wasn't backing down. But it also painted a target on his back in bold letters. Within an hour, a response came, not from Jay himself, but from one of his closest protégés, a respected MC with a massive following. He dropped a freestyle on Instagram, throwing subliminal shots at both M and Joyner. "Wolves get hunted when they howl too loud," he rapped, a line that immediately set off speculation about whether this was just the opening move of a much larger battle. Joyner sat in his home studio, staring at his equipment. Part of him wanted to stay out of it completely. Another part, the artist who built a career on unfiltered bars and unapologetic truths, was itching to respond. He knew any verse he put out now would be dissected line by line, and whatever side people thought he was on would be cemented for good. As he mulled it over, his phone rang again. This time, am. His tone was urgent, almost breathless. They're trying to box you in, man. Don't let them. You drop something now, make it about the truth, not about their war. Joyner's reply was slow, deliberate. And what happens if my truth sounds like I'm picking a side? Then, let it, Will said flatly. At least it'll be yours. The call ended, leaving Joyner with a decision he couldn't put off any longer. He pulled his chair to the desk, loaded a beat, and started writing. The words came faster than he expected, pulled from every conversation, every warning, every moment of pressure over the last week. He wasn't aiming to diss anyone outright. But he wasn't about to tiptoe around the fire either. By sunrise, the track was done. Raw, unpolished, but alive with the kind of energy that makes people stop and listen. He sent it to his engineer with a single instruction: drop it today, no promo, no rollout. The release hit streaming platforms like a sucker punch. Fans devoured it, pulling out their favorite lines, debating the intended targets. Some praised him for standing tall. Others accused him of fanning the flames. Industry insiders whispered about phone calls happening behind the scenes, doors potentially closing, bridges quietly burning, and as the smoke started to settle, Joyner sat alone in his studio, watching the play count climb. There was no going back now. The board had been flipped, the pieces scattered, and whatever game came next, he knew he was in it for real. But somewhere, in some other studio, another pen was already moving across paper, and the war of words was far from over. And that's where we leave it for now. The questions are still hanging in the air, and the tension is thicker than ever. Will Jay-Z himself step in and respond directly? Will Black Thought break his silence in a way that changes the entire conversation? Is Eminem already crafting the next verse to push this beyond just music? And most importantly, did Joyner Lucas just make the move that cements him as one of the most fearless voices in hip-hop? Or did he just walk straight into a trap set by the industry's most powerful players? This story isn't cooling down anytime soon, and you know the second a new track, a leaked clip, or even a cryptic tweet drops, the whole internet is going to light up again. Every word, every beat, every silence from here on out is part of the game, and we're all watching it unfold in real time. So, now I'm throwing it to you. What do you think is going to happen next? Will Joyner double down or step back? Will M and J ever share the same stage again after this? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of those moments where the fan theories might be as wild as the reality. If you've been riding with this breakdown and want to be the first to know when the next chapter in the saga explodes, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on all notifications so you never miss a single update. Trust me, you're not going to want to blink.